Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. We've got something great going on today. For those of you that can see the screen, my guest is outside, which is wonderful. So there's some nice flowers and stuff like that. We were just talking about bears and raccoons, so hopefully that doesn't interrupt our conversation. Eric Segalstad is with us today. He is the Vice President and partner of Gondwana Ecotours. Eric, did I say everything right?
Oh, you did. Of course you did. Thank you.
Well, that's because I practiced 10 times before we hit record, but it's really not that hard. But I know that, the obvious place to start, Eric, is Gondwana. What does that word mean, and how did that become the name of the company? I think that's the obvious first question.
Yeah. So Gondwana is the name of the old supercontinent. So we had Pangaea and Gondwana land. So Gondwana was up until about 180 million years ago. And we had the continents of South America, Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, and what is now Australia and New Zealand, and probably some other Pacific islands as well. They were all combined into one supercontinent. And then over the course of the eons of time, they drifted apart. So when my good friend and business partner, Jared Sternberg, founded the company, Gondwana Ecotours, he had come across the word through a reggae band, actually, called Gondwana. And he was really into that band, and he was wondering about the word, started researching it, and understood its meaning that I just shared. Jared thought that would be a great name for our company because his vision was really to try to bring people together again through travel and make the world a little bit smaller, a little bit friendlier. So that's where the Gondwana part of the name came from.
Sounds like a good synergy for the Big World Made Small podcast. I see some connections there because that's exactly how I came up with the name as well. But I got to ask you, because I always thought that was Pangaea. You mentioned the word Pangaea. Do you know the difference? Is it just the time frame, or what's the difference between Pangaea and Gondwana?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a difference in several 100 million years of geological history there. Yeah, no, it's and I probably should speak with even more authority on that, considering that my dad is a retired geologist. But here we go.
Hey, you got it, and you've obviously given it more thought than I have. I'd always heard Pangaea. So anyway, very, very cool name. Does that work well? I mean, it sounds like a great idea. Does it create confusion, do you think, for people?
Yeah, there was a time several years ago where we paused and said, hey, before we get a lot bigger, should we stick with the name or not? Because we found that a lot of people have a hard time pronouncing it, spelling it. And from a brand perspective, it could be a barrier, right? It's ideal to have something that everyone understands immediately and is on the tip of their tongue. Our name is not. We decided to stick with it. It seems to be working for us. I definitely hear the criticism that it's hard to pronounce. If you have never seen the word before, you don't know what it means. So I guess in one sense, it makes it memorable, but to each his own.
Well, I guess the flip side of that is if you're traveling, if I'm a guest traveling with you guys and I arrive at an airport somewhere and there's 50 guys standing there holding signs up with different brands and marks on it, that one's not going to get confused with anything else. It's not Quest. It's not travel this, whatever. It's like, okay, yes, this is definitely our driver. There's no doubt about
exactly.
it. So.
And that's the service that you get when you travel with us. We take care of all the details from when you arrive until when you depart. So we do have guides and drivers showing up at the airport with Gondwana, so Gondwana Ecotours. So yeah.
Very, very good. It definitely stands out. So I guess we've discussed the business already a little bit, kind of what's behind the name and all that. But let's do this for our listeners, because I want everybody kind of clear on what it is you guys do. So what's the kind of 60-second elevator pitch? Who do you serve? Where do you go? That type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to inspire meaningful connections between travelers and local communities and ecosystems, and creating experiences that drive positive, lasting impact. And that positive, lasting impact is not just for the travelers who are having a great time. So a big part of our tours, to kind of start with the tours, and I'll go more into details about what those things are and what they mean and how we do it. So the first thing is we have trips to sort of bucket lists places around the world. Not necessarily I want to go to see the Colosseum and the Taj Mahal, not those bucket list things, but it's more in sort of the nature, culture, wildlife. So for example, one of our oldest running tour that we still are running and is our most successful tour is our Northern Lights adventure in the interior of Alaska. So that's a big bucket list for a lot of people, right? To see the Northern Lights and experience that and see the amazing sight of just seeing, light just kind of dance across the sky, big black skies. So that is one bucket list experience. Another thing is, going on a safari. Now, there are many great destinations to do that in, but we go in Tanzania. We think it's a phenomenal place to witness the wilds of the African continent, specifically being able to witness the Great Migration, just seeing not only the big five and all of the animals that you come and want to see and hope to see, but also just seeing the sheer number of like wildebeest and zebras running around, and kind of being on the circular track on the Great Migration. So that's another example of a bucket list. I can go on like Patagonia, seeing the fjords of Norway and so forth. We are not everywhere yet. I don't know that we ever will be everywhere, but we hand select kind of where we want to go and develop these trips. And they are adventure by day, comfort at night. And then kind of going back to some of these other things that I mentioned earlier, like regenerative travel is sort of a buzzword today. And when we first started, that wasn't a term that was widely used or in vogue, but it really captures how we see travel. We see travel as a force for good. So we aim to leave a destination in a better place than what it was when we first showed up with our guests. And we want to help promote biodiversity, support local economies, and foster cultural exchanges. And so the way that we do that is by working with local partners and partners who typically are maybe about the size that we are ourselves. We really believe in paying people a fair wages, fair amounts for the service that they do. We really want to help also individuals and micro businesses in the places where we visit. So for example, on almost every tour we have taken a lot of time to kind of seek out people who aren't normally part of the tourist economy, meaning they don't have a hotel, they're not an activity provider, but they might be a family living off the grid in interior Alaska, and they have a small kind of subsistence type of farm. And they are, after chatting with them and explaining who we are and who our guests are, they are open to us coming to visit to learn from them and, just understand how they live and why they choose to live this way and raising a family this way. And we, where else can our guests sit around the table of someone living in interior Alaska eating moose stew that has been harvested by the family, and everything in the pot is grown by the family in this place called Frigid Farms. It's just an incredible experience. And our guests are mostly from the lower 48 of the United States. They are just fascinated. I mean, this is a fellow countrymen, countrywomen of them, and they're sitting there around the table just having so many great questions. And it's a circular thing in the way that the family also gets a lot out of the visits, both financially but also culturally as well, just in terms of having strangers come into their house, having their young kids who are somewhat isolated in a way have a chance to kind of chat with people from all over the United States as well, right in their living room and around their farm is an example. So we do this in foreign locales as well. It's something that's really near and dear to us, and we see the positive impact it has on our guests and the people. And one small kind of footnote to that is if you read our itineraries, a lot of times you will not even see those things mentioned in the itinerary. Because if I write about it, sure, I might consider myself a half decent marketing copywriter. That said, it's not going to have the same punch as some of the other things that we're seeing that seem so grand and magnificent in comparison. Yet, when we read our surveys, we see so many people, so many guests are reporting that their highlights of the trip was seeing the Northern Lights and also visiting the family and like
Yeah.
learning from them and eating the stew, that kind of stuff.
Well, there's a couple things there. One is just the surprise element. It's, we like pleasant little surprises, number one. And number two, if you wrote, okay, we're going to visit a family that lives off the grid in the bush and you're going to eat moose stew, doesn't mean it's not a cool experience. It's just like, how do you capture that ahead of time? It's one of those things you can't really, I guess where I'm going with this is like, if you say, okay, you're going to sleep in a tent under the Northern Lights and whatever, maybe people can kind of visualize that. It's like, okay, I get what that means. But if you say we're going to go have dinner with a family, it might even be, well, I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb here. It might even be off-putting to some people that like, why I'm on vacation. Why do I want to go to someone's house? That sounds weird.
Absolutely.
But if you don't tell them about it and then you take them there, it's like, holy cow, that was really, really cool. It's almost that, geez, we would have never thought of this, which is exactly the kind of experience you want to give, right? Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very,
absolutely.
very cool. You mentioned when I asked you kind of where, you said, well, there's the bucket list items. You mentioned Patagonia, African safari, Northern Lights, stuff like that. And then we shifted into a conversation more about some of these little kind of unique surprises. Really, you're really connected with the community. So maybe that was part of the answer to this next question. But I'm curious, like, what do you guys maybe do or that you're excited about doing in the very near future that the typical person listening to this, or maybe even some guests that have traveled with you in the past, just isn't even on their radar? And you guys think it's really, really cool. It's not on their radar, but it's something that most people don't know about, but you're pretty excited about. Do you have a few examples like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that pops into my mind, because it fits what you're saying, is so in August, so just last month, a few weeks ago from when we are taping this interview, we launched a tour to northern Peru and Bolivia. And we do include Machu Picchu as like a post trip because a lot of our guests have been, many of our guests have not been, would like to go. So the focus isn't Machu Picchu, but the focus is northern Peru with like Colca Canyon and Lake Titicaca and the indigenous people who live out on the the islands made from the floating islands made from reed in Lake Titicaca. And we timed the itinerary for when our departures are is in early April because we are visiting the Uni salt flats in Bolivia, which I'm sure many people have seen photos of or have been to themselves. And the salt flats I personally have not been there yet, but the salt flats are amazing. Like they are just like completely flat. They're scorched. They have some like mountains far in the distance, and you get to kind of see this like incredible vista. Like late March, early April, seasonally, historically, there's a thin layer of water of like an inch or 2 or 3 inches of water on top there. Guess what? When you're up at this, altitude, which is, I think it's 12, 13,000 feet or something like that. Don't quote me on the exact altitude. I might have that wrong, but it's a high altitude. It's an altiplano, right? So it's up high. The skies are huge and magnificent. And you may have a few clouds, you may not, and it's just a mirror reflection of the sky and the mountains and everything. It just makes it this otherworldly experience. So that's, I think, is an example of somewhere that like, I never thought to go there, but maybe I want to go now. Very excited.
I'm sure others on your team and some of your guests that have shared the experience with you told you about it. It sounds like standing inside of a sphere, because you've got a reflection of the sky all the way to the ground, or the reflection on the ground of the sky, and 360 degrees around you horizontally. It just sounds like you're standing in a big sphere of blue and clouds. Is that?
Yeah, kind of.
I want to see
I haven't
that.
thought about. I haven't thought about it as a sphere, but that makes perfect sense to me, Jason. Yeah, so my business partner, Jared, people on our team are pretty well traveled, as you can
Oh,
imagine,
sure,
like
yeah.
everyone else in travel. And one of Jared's like favorite experiences out of everywhere that he's been over the decades was going there around that time. So when we designed this trip in collaboration with our friend who's a Peruvian guide who I've known for longer than our company has existed, Juan Carlos Yunes, he and Jared mostly kind of, and our friend Danny, who's also working with us from Argentina. I'd say the three of them kind of collaborated more than anything else to kind of figure this tour out. So I'm extremely excited to go myself at some point. Hope they'll let me. And
I suspect they will. You've got a little pull
yeah,
around there, don't you?
yeah, I'll see. I'll see if I can make it happen. No, but no, so we're excited. So we just launched a tour. So we haven't had our guests out. So we've done, the scouting and the research and putting it together. And then our first departure will happen in 20.
Okay. It sounds like just the terms and the way you're describing this, I'm envisioning set departure group trips with extensions to go do something like Machu Picchu, because some of the people in the group have been and don't need to go to Machu Picchu, and then others would. So is that what it is? Is set departure group trip with extensions?
Yeah, we didn't talk about this yet, so that's a great question. So we do small group departure and they are scheduled. So we have set itineraries. We spend a lot of time developing and putting thought into the itineraries, which a lot of travel companies do, of course. And our group
Well, hold
sizes are
on, Eric.
between.
Eric, you say a lot of travel companies do that, but there's also a lot of travel companies that kind of do mix match of, the client comes to them and says, I want to do Machu Picchu, go to the Salt Flats and Lake Titicaca. And they just create something that maybe they haven't done. I'm not knocking anybody. There's
Yeah, yeah.
room for all of us. And there's definitely that type of thing where there's some people you can go to and they'll put you together some trip of a bunch of places they haven't been. It sounds like your angle is a little bit more like, hey, we've vetted these places. We know these places inside now, and we're going to take a group there and really show them a good time. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, and I think like for us, having good flow and good pacing and sort of tell a narrative on our tours is something that's really important to us. And I know that our guests pick up on it. I just guided two of our departures in Norway because that's where I'm originally from. So I just came back from there a couple of weeks ago, and it's exciting to hear guests who have traveled with you a couple of times. They're starting to like pick up on the things that we consider part of our brand, that we consider part of how we run and operate tours, but they have observed it and experienced it a few times now to where they're able to verbalize it back to us where, it's the tours are kind of building. So if you go
Mm-hmm.
on a safari with us in Tanzania and the first, full day we go to the Arusha National Park and it's different than the other national park because it's like densely wooded and they have lots of wildlife there, but because of the dense woods, you don't see everything. But that's just the appetizer. Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about it. Like, sure, we might see signs of elephants, but you're going to be extremely lucky if you see an elephant in Arusha National Park. Like I've seen it one time, and our guides who go there, have been there hundreds of times. I've seen it two or three times. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't see elephants there, even though they live there, because it's so densely wooded. So that's the appetizer. But 2 days later, when you're in Tarangire National Park, guess what?
You'll
There's
see
elephants
plenty.
everywhere.
You will see plenty. Do you typically send along a group leader, trip leader, either from the States or somebody that, I mean, I know that the guides on the ground also work with you and represent you, but do you have somebody that goes with the group and stays with them the entire time, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So in Alaska, we operate our own trips. We contract with our own guides, and we own the buses and the infrastructure, and have it all set up. So it's all very, very tightly kind of under our direct control and domain. So there, you're with two guides for a group size between 14 and 18. So we have two guides. They're all very qualified to know the area. And then on our international trips, often we do send trip leaders just to, I don't know, it's kind of there's a couple of ways that we think about it internally. One is it helps to kind of just be a bridge between the local guides and our groups. It also is a way for us to either, in my case, or Jared or Danny, who is our operation manager's case, just helps us because we need to go in the field sometimes, and then we act as trip leaders. And then occasionally we also send some of our guides from elsewhere as a trip leader because it gives them a chance to experience our tours in a different part of the world and get to know guides in different parts of the world, just as a sort of colleague to colleague. That knowledge that they and excitement that they had from going, somewhere else, they can bring back with them to where they are guiding, most typically Alaska, so far anyway. So we have, for example, later this fall, we have one of our Alaska guides is going to join as a trip leader in Argentina. And we don't need a trip leader to kind of run the tour there because we actually operate that one ourselves too through Danny, who's from there. But it's just a way for kind of helping make that big world make small again. So it's just a way to kind of make connections and bridge gaps. Yeah.
Yeah. And I promised you before I hit record, this is not a business podcast. We're not going to discuss business strategy and all that, but I will share one little thing that I used to lead a lot of group trips. And I mean, realistically, there are a lot of times I didn't need to be there. We had such great partners on the ground. What an amazing opportunity to connect with your guests, both from the business, but mostly from a personal level. And I remember my boss at the time, he's like, Jason, I don't like the word sales, but that's the conversation that we had. He's like, Jason, the best place to sell a trip is on a trip. And he wasn't meaning it like, oh, you just got to go there. And, I wasn't working on commission or anything. It was just the point being that if I'm with, I show up with the guests, get to know them. And within a couple of days, it's Jason, where are you going next? And it got to the point where if I set up a group trip that I was hosting, most of the spots would fill really quick. And then we're like, well, we probably ought to hold a couple spots for somebody new, but then those new people just kind of fit right in. And then it's like, and then it becomes, when are we going next? It's not, Jason, where are you going next? It's where are we going next? And, sometimes half of the group that went to Belize with me might go to Patagonia with me or whatever. And it's, that's part of the fun of doing this work is to create those connections. And it's like you've got your group of travel buddies and friends and they feel the same way, which honestly is a big part of what draws people to group travel anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's so true. And it also goes the other way around too now, where I was just on these two Norway trips and got, I had examples of people that I'd been with on tour before and had people that had been with us on tour meeting other people in our organization before, and then also some people who had never been traveling with us before, but the whole group just gelled so quickly together. And some of the first time travelers, they asked me a lot about Tanzania and the safari there, and 2 weeks after they came back, they were texting with me, and then they ended up booking the trip, and now I want to go with them. So now I want to go to Tanzania because it was a good time. So no, but it's just, it's hard to find. I mean, if I look around, like I have a lot of people in my life in the community where I live, and a lot of them were like, hey, I'd love to go traveling with you. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know if I want to go traveling with everyone that are in my life at home. But the people that I meet out on tour, they're more like-minded when it comes to traveling. So I'll actually be more prone to traveling with our guests than some of my friends.
Now we know that you're not going to tell any of your friends that you're on this podcast.
No, it's all right. It's all good.
I'm sure they get it. I get it.
I wasn't talking about you, good friend. I was talking about them.
The other, what I hear you saying is, if I told you about this podcast, you're a friend. You're one of the friends that I would travel with. That's what I hear you saying.
Exactly. Yeah, that.
If you're one of the people I don't want to travel with, you're never going to hear it because I'm not even going to tell you that I was on a podcast. So, all right, that sounds like a good deal. And kind of touching on that, or what you were just saying, was it was so much fun back in the office. We had a smaller team than you have, but it got to the point where like I had traveled with some of the same people that Jeremy had traveled and Abby had traveled with. So like when their names came up in the office, it's like, oh yeah, well, when we were in Mongolia, Bruce did this and that. And oh yeah, well, when he was in Brazil with me, he did this, and not making fun of them. Maybe it sounds like that's what I'm saying, but it's so much fun as a team to have these mutual people that we maybe have never seen in the same place at the same, like Jeremy and I might not be in the same place with Bruce, but he's been somewhere with Bruce. I've been somewhere with Bruce, and it's fun. And honestly, I think that that's where some of the tour operators that only do the kind of the custom trips or the bespoke itineraries that don't travel with their guests very often, I think that's kind of part of the fun that they miss out on.
Yeah.
But,
No.
but I also recognize that trip leading can be a challenge as well, because not everybody in a group is always a lot of fun. I mean, they're always a lot of fun. So someone that's listening to this that thinks that, oh, I would love to lead group trips. That just sounds like what a dream. Just travel the world with people and show them all this great stuff. What advice would you have for anybody that might be thinking that hasn't done it?
Yeah, no. Are you sure? Are you sure? No, I think
because you make it look so easy, Eric. I think I could do that job.
It's a phenomenal lifestyle for some people, but it requires a unique set of skills, I think, because you are basically working 18 hours a day with people who are your guests, your customers, and you have to make sure everyone is seen and heard and having a good time. And then, people are people, so there might be things that come up that are within your control or not within your control. And you just have to kind of problem solve and think on your feet. And again, just always with a smile. So just kind of that part of it is perfect for some people, depends on how you are wired. But for a lot, I'd say probably for most people, when you're kind of grinding that out on a 10-day trip, that might be too much for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. Can you think of like when you say types of people, maybe they're wired for it. And I've had this conversation with a few other people, so I'm curious what your thoughts. If you were recruiting for trip leaders and you hired a recruiter to go do that, what industry would you suggest they go after? If they had to go find people that have never been trip leaders, where would you suggest that they go look for candidates that you thought could have a better chance of doing the job?
Yeah. In terms of finding guides over the years, I've had great success with former teachers, retired teachers, because they're used to being sort of the leader in a group setting, a classroom. Mm-hmm. They're used to dealing with all sorts of different personalities who are, in the sense of kids, they might be kind of doing all sorts of weird things all at the same time that you need to kind of herd and get them back together and make them focus. So I think there's a lot of skill sets there. That
it can be like that. It can be like that with a bunch of 50 and 60-year-olds too.
I mean,
on vacation.
It's not to the same extent, at least not with our guests. It's not to the same extent. I would not compare it to a classroom. But what I do stand by though is that I think that a teacher's skill set really translates really well with additional training to become a great tour guide for small groups. I really do believe that, because they are, teachers, they are fond of knowledge and sharing it, and are good at finding a way to share that. And they're good at being leaders for a group and kind of getting people to kind of focus together and also do so in a fun and communal way. So that's why I do find that teachers are fantastic, usually make for fantastic tour guides.
I figured you might say that because I agree completely. And the other one I've heard come up that makes sense, and I don't know because I've never done it, but is bartenders. I've heard that people that have, worked bars long enough are pretty good at juggling a bunch of interests and people and maybe long shifts and just making sure, that because you're just dealing with a bunch of different people. It's a little different, obviously, on a tour, but also to be a good bartender anyway, you have to be fairly outgoing and driven to accomplish the goals and able to follow the rules as opposed to just letting people walk all over you. And I'm not saying that tour leaders have a problem with people walking all over them. But it's more like, hey, we do need to get going because somebody's waiting for us. but doing it in a way that people feel like it's natural and it's not like, oh man, our guide was running us around like a drill sergeant, because that's not going to work either. So, but anyway, it's just if we don't stop our 60-second elevator pitch soon, we're going to miss out on some other things. So I know that's where this all started. Let's take a pause on this because I want to make sure that, because this show's really about the connection. I think you mentioned it's kind of human interest, whatever, and I'm super interested in you as a human as well. So I want to make sure we take an opportunity to figure out how the heck did you get from wherever you were to where you are now. So how far back are you comfortable going to help us walk us through the journey? We don't have to cover every detail, but when do you think things started to happen that maybe shaped your future?
Yeah, I think looking back, it was probably pretty early, just in terms of my sense of adventure. I spent a lot of time outdoors, hiking and camping around in Norway where I grew up, and with my family as well. My dad, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, he's now a retired geologist. So he was a professor at the University of Oslo, and we growing up in Europe, like Spain, like southern Spain is sort of the Florida of Europe, where a lot of people from northern Europe will fly down to southern Europe to soak up the sun during the winter months. And my friends would go to the Canary Islands and, the Gold Coast down there to kind of soak up the sun. And we never did. And I was pissed about that when I was, 7 or 8 years old. Like, why can't we do this? So, but I come to really recognize later that a big sense of my adventure came from the things that we did as a family. So we had, for example, we went to Iceland twice and would take, back then there was a car, it was a ferry where it was a car ferry. So you could go from Bergen on the west coast of Norway. And then it was like 2.5 or 3 day sail over to Iceland. So we would go with our car. This was in the 80s. So go with our car over to Iceland. So the first time we did the ring road all the way around Iceland, and that was in our, you know, it's like I think maybe like a late 70s Volvo station wagon.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first trip, and then 2 years later we came back, and by then my dad had one of the G wagons, like so it's a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and this time we crossed Iceland. There's no road. And so they're just sort of like tracks, and you cross like glacial streams along the way. You need to kind of find your path to safely cross the streams. I think there was like one place that was sort of like a lodging of questionable standard in the middle of there somewhere, but everything else was just camping. And we're like in lunar landscapes. There's no gas station. We had jerry cans of
Mm-hmm.
gasoline on the roof, and so that was like a great experience. And I was like 10 years old doing that with my
Let me ask you
family.
this. Let me ask this before I forget. You described 2-3 day ferry trip. Did you like camp in the car, or I mean, did
Yeah,
this?
so it's no. So you park the car on the ferry on the bottom deck, and then they had some very, very simple, I would not call them staterooms, like cabins, very simple, that you could say it was not a fancy ferry, but it was good enough to kind of get across. And yeah.
And it was presumably more economical than flying and renting a car.
Probably, but I also think my dad liked the idea of bringing his own gear and things like
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
So then the other, I'm just guessing, he's a geologist, and you're going to Iceland. It was more about the interesting geology there, and where you
That
guys
was
like, was you spend a lot of time climbing around in the creek beds and
a
picking up
little bit.
rocks, or?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of our vacations ended up. I started sensing a pattern after a while. I'm not the smartest guy, but after a while, I started to be like, every vacation ends up being an interesting volcano or some other geological feature.
Well, yeah, when you're young, you don't put that together. You're like,
Nah.
okay, this is just what the world looks like. The world looks like a lot of volcanoes and
So yeah, so that
glaciers. And
was like early formative experience, I think, like doing that. And then once I was old enough to kind of branch out on my own, um, I went to college in the United States, and I have a background in business. I was actually studying finance and economics, and I liked it as like an kind of um, academic discipline. It sort of made sense for me at the time. And then my goal in like high school and the early part of college was like, oh, okay, I'll just work, make a bunch of money, and then retire early so I can travel and see the world.
Mhm.
And then sort of my senior year, I was like, wait a minute, like, why wouldn't I want to see the world while I'm still, you know,
Yeah. And
young?
what if? What if? You never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen, right?
So I got a job out of college in the financial field, which was a great kind of. It was actually a really great opportunity for what I was interested in at the time. But I kept living like a college student, meaning I had a good paycheck, but I was so frugal, and I saved all of the money, and then I worked for like a year or so, and then I went traveling. I got a one-way ticket to Central America and spent almost a year traveling around. and just kind of it was like a sense of adventure, a sense of freedom, a sense of exploration. So that was a nice time. And after that, I came back to Norway. I helped co-found a search engine optimization company, and this was like in 2000. So there was like people didn't even understand. A big part of my job was to kind of do these like little seminars to kind of teach people the importance of SEO and what it was. That was a brand new discipline. And then try to convince them that they should, buy services from us. So, and it's a hard sell. You as a sales, former person in sales, it sounds like you know this, Jason. Like, it's easier when people know they have a problem that they want to sell, that you can sell. It's a lot harder when you have to explain that they do have a blind side that they didn't know about, and we're here to fix it. So we
And
did, we did.
they're not usually particularly that interested in learning about it.
No. So, but we did okay, but we were kind of a little bit too early, I think, almost for that. But so I helped do that. I helped grow that business for 3 years or so, and then I sold it to the majority owner, and then did the same thing again. Took my meager savings, and this time traveled around Southeast Asia. I traveled in Spain, Morocco, and a few other places. So again, just like kind of getting these experiences that were important to me. I've also been a long time passionate backcountry skier. So skiing big mountains, you climb up on skins on their skis, and then you ski down. And so we also had, with a couple of friends of mine, we went to Iran to ski in the mountains there. So there was like, the reason why I'm sharing that is like that a big part of, for me, is travel and experiencing new places, but also finding different places to go ski mountaineering has also been a big driver for me. So I've had experiences in Gulmarg, Kashmir, really early on. It's another project I did called Line of Control. Where it was a sponsored blog where there wasn't really any information about skiing in Kashmir. This was back in 2006, 2007. So I was able to kind of put a project together with a media company, get some industry sponsors from equipment manufacturers and so forth, and then documenting, skiing in Gulmarg, and they have a couple of ski lifts there from the 60s, and it was kind of like a Wild West at the time out there. That honestly helped put that place a little bit on the map. There was a lot of people kind of coming in the seasons beyond that, that came because of the blog, and I say that with conviction because I know several of the people who have been going there ever since and started businesses and to bring people there that were inspired by that. So I skipped ahead just one step. So in between, before I went to Kashmir, I felt an urge to get into storytelling. So just being able to communicate in writing. I was a big reader, and being all these places, traveling to all these places, just my mind was going places that it wouldn't go at home. And I think most travelers can appreciate that, especially if you're traveling on your own, or in really, really small groups, and you have like a good pacing where that kind of allows you to let your mind drift a little bit. So I got really drawn to writing, and I saw that storytelling was a good skill to have. I got accepted into a master's program in journalism, not because I wanted to become a journalist, but it was more because I really wanted to become a better writer and a better storyteller. And I talked my way into some creative writing workshops for the master's program in creative writing, which was a different program, but I was able to talk my way into those, which was also very helpful. So kind of coming out of my graduate studies, spent a couple of years as a skiing and outdoor journalist, while I was working on some other writing projects as well. So I did a lot of work with ski and skiing magazines and Mountain Gazette and other outdoor publications. And that's when I ended up in creating this project in Kashmir around that time. And then, I saw that while it was a fun life and living, I didn't really see a financial future that was where it was achievable to buy a house and kind of grow up and kind of have more grown up expenses. And I was getting a little bit, at that point, I was probably in my late 20s probably. And keep in mind, I was coming out of like business school 10 years earlier, where my peers from business school already kind of excelled from a financial
they're
and build.
directors, VPs,
Yeah. And here
and
I
you've got a
am
really
just like,
cool travel blog.
yeah. And I don't pay for my skis and gear, but I don't have much else to show for it either.
But at the same time, I bet they were all looking at you thinking, oh my gosh, look at him, right? That grass is always greener type of thing.
Grass is always greener, but I think that for me, I just knew that there's a very, very select few people in that world who's able to make a decent middle class living, and it's just a hustle and a grind. I don't mind working. I've worked, hard at going through going to my goals or achieving my goals for my whole life, but it was a different kind of grind there was very little financial reward at the end of that grind. So that kind of helped shift my focus a little bit.
And I'm curious, we don't need to go into this, but it's an interesting thing that myself and other people that I've had conversations with recognize as a challenge, especially when you're traveling to that level and you have, maybe some instability in your life. It can make developing relationships with people, maintaining relationships with people. So I wanted to touch on, how did your parents feel or other people in your family feel about you when you kind of just took off to go do this stuff? And what did the relationship stuff was that part of why I think I need to go buy a house and grow up now? And I'm trying to use your words, but so that's the question. And then what advice do you have for other people that are still in the traveling stage, that might help them figure some of this out ahead a little quicker?
Yeah. Well, I think with my parents, I think they already knew years before that I was very driven to do my own things.
Mm-hmm.
I was always academically good at what I did, so that was an important thing for them because they're both academics. So that was really important that I kind of went and got a degree, and then beyond that, there were definitely some destinations that I would go to, such as Iran and Kashmir, where they're like, really, are you sure about this? I don't know about this. But they also knew that they couldn't stop me, and nor would they necessarily try to stop me, but they were just, being what good parents should do, which is, when you are concerned about something, you bring it up. And at that point, I was an adult. So then, I would have to do what I wanted to do with that information and that opinion. So that part was good. In terms of relationships, I think actually I felt more connected to more people then than I did immediately thereafter. This was still a time where people, or at least I, took the time to write long emails to people that were of a personal nature to stay in touch as hey, we're past a letter writing, but I'm still writing an email like a letter. So I was actually really good at keeping in touch with people that lived in different places where I had lived or had connection to. And then sort of this notion of house was not that I wanted to buy a house then and there. I was just kind of looking ahead in the future. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I think this is a really fun and great experience to have had for a few years, but this is not what I need to be
maybe not
continuing.
sustainable, huh?
Yeah, it's not sustainable. It just didn't. And I think a big part of it was maybe even less of the money and more the grind for very little money, because, for anyone who's written for magazines, you spend a lot of time pitching, coming up with a story. So you're pitching an article idea. So you're already doing a bunch of work up front for just on speculation. You have no idea. And then if the editor likes it, then great. Then they might say, okay, now do a story. And they might change the focus of the story a little bit to fit what they think works better for their publication. And then maybe you do the work and you get paid by the word. But you don't get paid yet. So you do all the work, and you get paid within a month or so after the publication of the story. And in terms of periodicals, like magazines, you could do the work 8 months before and then get paid before publication, get paid 10 months later. So then 10 months after you kind of did the majority of the work, you're getting paid a little bit of money. It's just this grind, and it's just not a great business model for a writer.
Well, and also, I mean, I'm not going to suggest this about you, but myself, who's passionate about, I've been traveling full time for 4 years. I still need to grow up. I was growing up for a while, but anyway, I've been traveling for 4 years. And for me, it's because I like the variety. I like the uncertainty. I actually thrive in the uncertainty. But for me to plan my budget 8 months in advance, if I'm doing work now that I'm not going to get paid for 8 months for, that's like outside of my window of I almost can't even see that far into the future. So it's hard for me to do the grind for something that's going to pay off 8 months from now. So I just maybe, when you were at that point in your life, I don't know. Yeah, I can see the challenge.
Yeah.
So so is that how you ended up in Vermont, or walk me through the next steps to what got you there?
Yeah, no, I was in based out of Boulder, Colorado during the
Okay.
kind of my ski journalism phase. And I was in a relationship with someone from Vermont who lived in Colorado, and she
Mm.
wanted to move back home for her. So I did. The relationship didn't work out over time, but I found a great community here of people, and I found my now wife here as well. So she was living here as well. She's not from Vermont either. So that's how I ended up here. And while I was here, this kind of brings us to this next phase, which explains how I ended up in the travel business. Was I spent time working as a marketing consultant because I at this point I just kind of summarizing some of the skill sets, like I had the business background. I'd already helped build up a company in the early stages. I knew how to use modern technology, digital marketing tools in order to be seen, in order to be found, and also had the storytelling experience as well from all of the writing that I'd done. So just kind of putting all of those things together and continuing to want to live an independent life and not be someone going into an office every day. I was working as an independent marketing consultant. So I was helping businesses grow, and there'd be all different kinds of businesses. There were, small to medium businesses. And I would come and help establish help established marketing teams with some of their tasks, or it might be someone like a law firm, for example, that doesn't have someone on marketing, but they're an active law firm in serving the community, and they also are facing competition. They need to make sure that they're being found and so forth. So that was one of my clients, was a law firm like that. And I did I think a great job for them. And then one of the partners there mentioned me and my skill set to his wife, who was a director for a tour operator. And she was like, "This sounds like someone that we should meet." So I was invited to come into this meeting. That I, it was just sort of like word of mouth, and that's how it
Mm-hmm.
works for a lot of us, is word of mouth. So I came into the meeting, and the president of that company, the tour operator, was also there, and we had a meeting, and it went really well, and they wanted to engage me for like 15 hours a week or something like that, which worked with my schedule. I was excited because the first time I met someone, when they kind of, at that time I had, my resume, I had like travel, I just kind of had like different countries I'd been to. And for the first
Mm-hmm.
time, that was like an important part of my resume,
Right.
first meeting, where they're like, "Oh my, you've been to all of these places, and we have tours in almost all of them, and you've been to most of the places." So that was like an additional kind of skill set, right? So they didn't need to like tell me what it's like in Morocco, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
spent time in Morocco, not on their tour, but
Mm-hmm.
I read the itinerary, I talk to the tour manager, and find ways to,
Well, and you've got a proven interest in travel, because the reality is you can go to most people. If you go to them and say, "We've got a job in the travel industry. Do you like to travel? Are you excited about travel?" Most people are going to say yes. And they might be really good marketers. They might be really organized. They might have a lot of skills, but they're going to say yes. But then when you look at the person that's got a passport stamped full of stuff and just went on their own because they were drawn to do it, that's a totally different thing. Right. So I get that. Whereas maybe a more traditional type of company interviewing you or meeting with you might look at your list of all the places and said, "Oh, this guy has no stability. He's only going to be around for a year. He's obviously got ADHD," and it might actually count against you. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like that was the first time I was like, "Oh wow, this is actually something positive. I like this." So, and it was a really great organization. So I would do some work independently and I'd come into the office and I actually enjoyed the people that were there. And I was like, wow, these are my kind of people, right? These are people working in the travel industry. And I don't think that I would have, I feel like I came in at the right time for me, right?
Hmm.
So I felt like I needed to have this journey until I started working with that company. And over time, it ended up being a lot more work, you know. So I got more and more work and responsibility as I was able to deliver. And at the end of at the end of my tenure there, I was the director of marketing for the company, helping drive the business, helping maintain the brand, not as much shaping it because it was already a pretty established brand. So I learned a lot from people that were there and learned a lot about the travel industry as well. And while I was working for them, I also, because I was still working as a consultant for most of my time there, so I was at liberty to work with others. So I expanded to work with other non-competing travel businesses as well. So one of my other clients do predominantly like Arctic cruises and some Antarctic cruises, for examples. That was non-competing with the company I was with. So that kind of expanded my expertise a little bit as well, because you learn from how different companies are doing different things and different guest profiles and different destinations, different style of travel.
Hmm.
So that was one of several examples where I worked as a consultant for a lot of different companies in our space. So that kind of brings me to a assignment that I was on. So I was working with it's basically volunteer work with the Rainforest Alliance, and this was probably 13, 14, 15 years ago or so. So um, I was in Del Oriente in Ecuador, in the Amazon part of Ecuador,
Hmm.
and the Rainforest Alliance were helping a collection of indigenous owned lodges in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And they were all different standards. They had no similarities other than the fact that they were owned and operated by the indigenous tribes in the areas where they were. So I was there as part of a sort of an industry contingent from North America, where there's 5 of us, I think, and we were experiencing the lodges as a guest. And then we would kind of be really aware, since we are from the industry, and then we had a meeting in Quito in Ecuador, the capital, after it all wrapped up, after we had a chance to experience the lodges. And then we had a sort of a, you know, hotel meeting room type of meeting with the leaders of each of the lodges, and just offering them advice on different things, on how they could do tweaks they could make to kind of make their product better, or their marketing better, or their branding better, and so forth. So for example, it could be as simple as, hey, we noticed that your mosquito netting was all brown, and North American travelers, when they come in and see that, how do they feel about it? Yeah, it's kind
Hmm.
of gross. It doesn't feel a lot of clean, all that stuff. So that it could be something at that level to, hey, when I go on your website, you position yourself as being this, but when I experienced it there on the ground, it actually felt more like that. There's nothing wrong about this or that, but if you're that, then let's try to manage expectations by positioning yourself on the website in a different way, which is a
Right.
major thing, right? Because if you miss that, then guests come and they show up and they feel like they're not getting what they signed up for.
Or the flip side is maybe the place is actually, I don't want to use the word nicer, but maybe it's nicer. That's just for simplicity. Maybe the actual location is much better than what's represented on the website. So then they're missing out on opportunities there. So either way, it's not a win. Yeah, I get that. All right.
So while I was there, so the first lodge we went to was the Kapawi Eco Lodge. Um, it was beautiful. It was pretty simple, not like basic, but it was kind of simple. You know, there's no AC or anything. It's all, you know, kind of built up over kind of a wetland area set aside from a river. The Achuar, who are the tribe that live there, they just absolute badasses in the rainforest, and it was a really cool experience where you learned a lot from them. I think it's perfect, not for someone looking for like premium accommodations and lodging, but someone who wants like nice and clean and good food, but not extravagant, but like focus on sort of what you're there to experience. Like it's perfect for them. So while I was there, I met a younger than me man who was volunteering at the village for the Achuar, and then about once a week he would travel by canoe and foot to kind of make it to the lodge to access Wi-Fi so he could check his beloved soccer scores from the European League, and he send an email to his parents saying it was good and kind of catch up and maybe talk English with someone who was native English speaker, that kind of stuff. So he would show up at the lodge. So I meet this guy, his name is Jared, and he was about to enter his last year of law school. He was studying environmental law at Tulane in New Orleans. And he said, hey, I really don't want to become an attorney anymore. I really want to start a travel company. And I liked the guy, and so we had some great conversations.
Did he kind of know what you'd been doing when he said that, or is he just was so anxious to tell somebody that he told the first person that he could?
He already knew at that point. He already knew that I was in the business, and it was kind of like in the world is a little bit small. It was just kind of, I was representing a company that he traveled with that company, the same company, on his first international trip with his parents. So like it was his introduction to international travel was with the company that I was representing at the time.
Okay. So you guys.
So that was kind of an interesting coincidence and connection. So we had some great conversations over the course of, 2 days. And then I left and I gave him my information so that he can keep in touch. And I was just helping him, I was just kind of sharing as, in the weeks and months and year that followed. I would, take time to answer his questions via email. And also we had some phone calls. And then he founded Gondwana Ecotours. And he said, hey, do you want to join me? I want you to work with me. And I was like, yeah, that's, he wasn't funded. Right. So I was like, yeah, I have a life now. And like, I just couldn't do that financially. It just didn't make any sense to me. But I said, I'd love to keep helping you and I'm happy to do so. But now that you've started the company, it probably makes sense for you to start paying me, even if it's just a little bit. So he paid me what was for him a decent amount of money out of his meager budget, and what's for me at the time a teeny amount of what I pulled in as a consultant in the business. But again, this was just like I really felt like he was a friend, right? We had developed a kind of friendship, but at the same time, I was helping his business. So so I've been involved since before the company was founded, and the whole plan, the entire way along was once we got to a level that made sense that I would join full time.
So so out of a meeting while on a trip, working in the business on a trip, that you created this, and I couldn't help but be reminded when we were discussing earlier when I said the best place to sell a trip is on a trip. It's because of those connections. It's because you have such a different connection with someone when you meet them at an eco lodge, let's say, in Ecuador or wherever, as opposed to a LinkedIn connection, a phone call, or you happen to run into somebody down at the pub or whatever. That's pretty cool. And now you're there and you guys are doing big things. So how long have you been how long you've been at a point where you were actually making money? I don't know how else to ask you. Like when did you go from kind of a barely paid consultant to, okay, I'm on the team and I'm all in now?
Oh yeah. You mean with Gondwana?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, my contract expanded a little bit over time, but it was still fairly meager. And then, I must have phenomenal timing because I joined the business full time and then kind of swore off and winded down all my other contracts that I had as a consultant with others so January 1st, 2020 is when I joined.
I knew you were going to say that, but your other contracts probably would have struggled too. So I don't know. Was it a good, I mean, you say it kind
It
of
was,
jokingly, was it actually a good thing or?
I think it was a good thing. I mean,
Yeah.
here's the thing. So I kind of, at this point I had the house, and my wife and I were married and had been for, 5 years or 6 years at the time. So we kind of had this life, right? That most people live, where you have expenses and bills to pay,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And so I joined, like, I'm doing this full time now. I'm fully on the team. Don't have any other distractions work wise. This is it. And then, 3 months, not even 3 months later, oof, we give each
Yeah.
other a very generous 50% pay cut to try to kind of make this go by. But I think it was good in the sense that I was able to pick up some work outside of the industry because of, people I know and I've worked with before. So I was able to work specifically with a friend of mine locally here who owns a design marketing agency,
Okay.
and he doesn't have a lot of my brand skills or he doesn't have that in house. So I was able to join on product projects with him that benefited his company, benefited his clients, and also benefited me, right? Because
Right, right, right.
I was able to do moonlight and do some of that. But going back to Gondwana, it was, it was hard for everyone in the travel industry. Of course, something that was unprecedented for any of us in our business. And, I'd been through the 2008 financial crisis and seen what that could do. I'd been through volcanoes in Iceland blowing. So like the whole like Northern Europe summer season is shot for a company that
Mm-hmm.
relied on that. It's like I'd seen that, but never had I experienced that you couldn't even utter the word travel. Like that was new to all of us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we hunkered down, and there was three of us at that point that were able to kind of sustain and maintain. And we hunkered down and we did the best that we could. And then we put our, well, at some point, we don't know when, but at some point, people will start traveling again. We are guessing that it will be gradual, that people either will not be comfortable traveling internationally when it first starts opening up, or they'll legitimately
Agreed.
be impossible due to, red tape from the different countries. So, 90% of our clientele are from the US. So that's who majority of our guests are. So we were just thinking, you know what? Where's a bucket list place that we think people are going to travel to when it opens up? Alaska. Well,
Alaska. Yep.
we already had at the time, I think we only had two itineraries. Maybe we had three at the time. I don't remember. We had two or three itineraries in Alaska at the time, and those were more or less year round because in between Northern Light season and the summer season, that's almost year round in Alaska. So we kind of put all of our chips in for the summer season to begin with, and also winter season, but put all our chips in by getting hotel reservations. And we're like, let's just have a bunch of reservations. We can cancel them without penalty if we do so far in advance. They'll totally understand if we do, because if people aren't traveling yet, they're not going to be able to fill them anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, let's just try. And then we didn't sit on our hands doing nothing, but we're kind of sitting on our hands doing nothing, waiting for the phone to ring, right? So in the spring of 2021, it started ringing. Hey, we'd like to go to Alaska. And within like a couple of weeks, we were completely sold out in Alaska for our
Wow.
summer.
Yeah.
So given where we were set up and what the few chips we had to kind of play on this table, we ended up, in retrospect, playing them the best way that we could have for our size, our network. So
Yeah.
we came out of the pandemic, like many other companies too, but we came out of the pandemic kind of like a rocket. So we had several years of just being really catering to all that pent up demand. Yeah.
Well, now it's good for the guests as well, because when they're able to find an operator that was planning ahead and actually made reservations and had space, then that's good for them as well. Where there were a lot of operators that just like, we're not doing anything. Like we're not going to spend a dime on anything. We're not going to do any new product development. We're just going to see if we can keep, not even keep the lights on, just turn the lights off and hopefully when things come back, we can jump back in the pool. So maybe just one more personal question. Is your wife, does she work in travel? Or you didn't get the double whammy there, did you?
No,
I mean,
no, we're
maybe she
both
wasn't working at all. I don't know, but
no. So she's a mental health therapist. So
well, she probably
yeah,
was really busy.
yeah, she
I,
she
I
still is busy.
I don't mean to say it as a joke, but I mean it's a reality. That's one my understanding, just through personal experiences with my family. That was an area that saw a pretty big increase in demand,
Totally.
which is a sad thing as well. But at least all right, very cool. Eric, we've discussed a bunch of things. I think you're a super interesting character. I think that anybody that's already doing business with you needs to hear your story. That's just my personal take on it. But also, listeners that haven't connected with you, haven't connected with your company, there's going to be a link right in the show notes. So I'm going to encourage them to go down there, go take a look at some of these trips, and maybe go check out the salt flats or any number of places, but really just connect with you guys and see what makes sense. But before I let you go, is there anything I forgot to ask you? I absolutely should have asked you, or anything you want to make sure our listeners know, either about you, life, storytelling, the world, anything in particular that you want to make sure they hear before we wrap up?
I think the only thing, and you touched on this a little bit earlier in one of your comments, which is what draws you to travel, which is very similar to what draws me to travel, which I also think is the same. That goes into how we create our tours and what also draws our guests to keep coming back. And that is adventure is excitement. It's feeling alive and it's experiencing new things and meeting new people and really being humbled by learning new things from new people, just kind of understanding and seeing that things can be done differently than what you're used to, and they're just as sound, right? And the food that they eat might be completely different, but they're just as sound. People are eating and living off of this. And what's so awesome about travel is all of that, and the fact that for me, a good trip, it's physical, it's mental, and there's intellectual aspects all bundled into one. And that's what I find so enticing about travel. And I think, Jason, that's maybe using some different words, but that's probably what excites you about traveling too.
Yeah.
And same for our guests. And that kind of brings us back to our name. I know we didn't really touch on eco tours as much and what that means to us, which is okay. But it kind of brings us back to Gondwana and Big World Made Small, where we're kind of putting all of these things back together again. Because I think that in times like these, I get so encouraged and inspired by seeing people coming together and finding common ground and experiencing things together and being able to laugh at ourselves a little bit and not take ourselves so seriously. I think that's a beautiful thing. So while I cannot and we cannot solve the world's biggest problems, I do feel like we're making a small impact for a number of people within our spheres. And I think that the same holds true for you, Jason, and for all of our guests and all of your other panelists too. So thank you for putting this together.
Yeah. There's absolutely nothing I could add to that. I have the privilege of looking at your face as I hear you say that, and it gets me excited because it resonates the same with me. If we can just bring people together, things change, and I guess the only one thing I would add is there is a bit of a challenge and maybe our space, because oftentimes the companies will hire really, really organized trip planners that really crave order and routine and certainty. So you take somebody that's really good at making sure that things are certain and organized and happen flawless, and then try and figure out, okay, how do we mix in just a little bit of spontaneity to how do we build into the itinerary that dinner with the family living off the grid in Alaska? That can be a really hard concept for somebody that's maybe coming from the banking industry or typically, even finance industry. So it's a challenge, and it sounds like you guys are doing a pretty good job of it. So I think that's pretty cool. So Eric, thank you so much. Appreciate you, and great conversation, and look forward to doing it again at some point in the future. Thank you so much.
Jason, thank you so much for having me on and us on. I really love it. So it was a great time chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.